Now, Louise Galvin is with us this morning. Louise, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, how's things?
Bit of a bombshell yesterday with CJ Stander announcing his retirement, but at the same time, you put all this stuff in the context of what's going on in the world, and he just decided that he wants his daughter to grow up in South Africa alongside his grandparents, her grandparents, and it's like, well, fair enough.
Yeah, and absolutely. I don't think CJ owes Munster Ireland or anything for the massive positive contribution he's made to rugby here and the way he's completely adapted to rugby in Ireland and to life in Ireland and adopted Ireland, I suppose, as his home country. But I suppose there is that kind of question then of there's almost disappointment that someone that is still at the peak of their powers is retiring when they've just reached their 50th cap. We'll have the begrudgers and the naysayers saying, well, maybe this is a problem with project players if this is never really truly their home. When things like kids come along, then is that, how is this system flawed in that sense? Because we could have a Jack Conan picking up those caps, or we could have Rhys Ruddock picking up those caps, or someone else who's able to carry that experience forward with an experienced world-class number 8 then to bring into the next World Cup. So there is that kind of element to it. But listen, I'm a huge fan of CJ. I've actually really enjoyed one of the things with the lack of crowds is that when he this year and when the ref mic picks up the back of the scrum, you just constantly hear him, whether it's from Munster or for Ireland, like, come on boys, that, and it's that positive, whether they've just retreated 40 metres, whether, whose put in it is, wherever the momentum is going, CJ's constantly, that positivity from him at the back of the scrum, I think, is just a small snapshot that we can see at home of what he brings from that, even that positivity point of view, that from CJ. And certainly the sound bites coming out of camp, that's certainly what we're hearing from the guys in terms of his contribution on and off the field.
Yeah, look, there was an outpouring of love essentially from Sexton and from Earls and from Peter O'Mahony, and we'll talk about that in a moment, because it was interesting that Peter O'Mahony was put up for media yesterday, presuming that the Ireland coach is not doing a Warren Gatland on it and sticking Brian O'Driscoll out the week before he drops him. So maybe that's a hint about team selection. Maybe it's not. We'll see as the week goes on. But just it is an interesting point there that you raise about the whole notion of the project players. I think it's possible to really love CJ and love everything that he's brought, and then to just ask those questions about what is the right way for us to pursue this in the future. Given that it's 5 years now, one obvious solution to that is to stop recruiting 23-year-olds and 25-year-olds and start recruiting 18 and 20-year-olds, which is, I think, already happening. And do we decide that actually, if our culture is going to be self-sustaining, that it's better to try and get people who will be here and, hopefully enter into the Irish rugby culture afterwards and become influential in it, either through media or coaching or whatever it is? And do we stop looking for project players, or do we just accept that actually that's part of the transaction here? We need better players. That's going to cost us. They might not live with us forever, and who cares? I can't work out what the right thing here is. What do you think?
Well, look, I think the whole project players obviously going from 3 to 5 years is something that, when you're recruiting players either way, if they want to play international rugby, they really need to be ready to completely adapt into the society they're moving into, whether it be Ireland or Scotland or France, wherever it is. So that, that has kind of, I suppose, helped from that point of view of the idea of people coming in and leaving again. You're contracted to play rugby. You're not contracted to live here forever, so it'll always be a bit of an issue. And players are well within their rights to move back home. And if they come in and make that positive contribution, which, like CJ, is certainly, I suppose, up there at Easton Sewa and probably the two guys that have contributed the most to certainly provincial rugby in Ireland. I know he says obviously it wasn't an Irish international, but when you talk about these players coming in and making contribution, they're probably the two guys that are up there, and we certainly wouldn't hand them back. I think over the years there's a lot of players that have gotten criticism that are selected consistently, and when you think about it, in the last year or so, people are still saying CJ, he just does it week in, week out. The abuse that his body takes, and he is so robust. I mean, when was the last time we worried about CJ not being able to complete a game or not being fit for selection? Like, he certainly doesn't owe us anything, and he's well within his rights to go back. But as you say, there, it's an ongoing issue. It's something we'll always have to be aware of, that if they decide to, and in this case, we don't really know the personal details, besides the fact that maybe with COVID, everyone's reflecting on their own personal story. But if something sudden was to happen, anyone's child or wife or whatever, they could up sticks and move home at any stage, and they're well within their rights to do so. And that's just, part of the beast.
And I think that COVID has to be factored in here as well, because we had CJ on the show last year and he was talking about going back to South Africa during the first lockdown and spending a bit of time on the farm. If there wasn't a global pandemic, he might not have had the opportunity to do that. He might not have actually been drawn away from Ireland once again. And everybody was in this tunnel vision and way of life before March last year, which includes rugby players, which includes the human beings that are playing rugby. And maybe this is just down to the fact that the world has been turned on its head last year and CJ Stander has changed his mind about how long he wants to spend in Ireland. I think he deserves something of a free pass in that regard.
Yeah, I agree. So now, I'm not sure, this whole retirement from rugby, in one way, it's a bit disappointing that someone who's such a prolific player can just fully retire. But I also wonder, when he gets back, I wouldn't be hugely surprised if we don't see him lining out again down in South Africa. And I think that people might think then, the statement was a little bit, just a little bit untrue. But listen, we'll have to take him at his word, because his effort and his communication certainly has been nothing but honest since he's arrived. So we'll have to back him for the moment.
The other thing that I think feeds into this is I'm not in rugby change rooms with these guys at this stage, but the stories that have come out over the last year about Steve Thompson and Alex Popham and that group of players who are taking an action in England and across England and Wales, and some Scottish players as well, that must be featuring in some players, particularly who are just entering their 30s, going, I played against some of these people. I was literally on the same field as some of these people. So they're not 70-year-olds who headed the ball too much. It's not a far distant thing, and the science and the knowledge that's coming out so quickly, I don't know if that factors into anybody's thoughts about retirement and playing on. I don't know, but certainly if you had made your money and you could go back and do the thing that your family have always been doing with a little bit of a nest egg, and you've got your health, I can see why this might be a story that begins to happen for more and more people as they hit their early 30s in particular.
Yeah, I agree with you as well. I mean, maybe it's an incredibly mature decision, and one in 10 or 15 years they look back and say, wasn't he the smart guy to do that, to go out in a high? As he clearly has massive mass on his family and putting them first. So maybe he is thinking about that, and the type of game he plays, offensively, defensively. I mean, if anyone's going to be a risk at, something like what Steve Thompson is suffering from, CJ could put himself in that bracket. I mean, you go playing rugby, you might expect your body to be a bit wrecked after it, but those players, they don't expect their head to be wrecked after it. So maybe he is going out thinking, listen, I've been lucky here. I've gotten on pretty well. I'm going to take my memories and my experiences, and I'm going to head off home, and thanks a million.
Yeah, I think that would be fair enough. Is Peter O'Mahony starting this game at the weekend? Is that why he was out doing media yesterday, or does it not matter anymore? Has that all passed, do you think?
I don't think that has all passed, but I think because we're going to have a few changes, I think one has an influence on the other, if that makes sense. I'm not going to answer directly. I think he could be starting if we see Tadhg Beirne move directly to the second row. Obviously, Tadhg Beirne is going to be dropped after his performances. I think the fact that we have to make two definite injury changes with Gary Ringrose and James Ryan out, then potentially James Lowe being dropped on the back of a performance. That's three personnel changes. Are we going to add in positional changes as well? Like, for example, if you start Ryan Baird and say, look, we're going to keep Tadhg Beirne in the back row, I'm going to bring Ryan Baird straight in as a direct replacement in the second row of James Ryan. Well, number one, it's obviously a lot of pressure on him, but we're also going to have potentially two more changes in the back line. And I'm also not sure if we're going to see Conor Murray starting this weekend. I'd certainly hope that we're going to see him coming on earlier than the fact that he didn't come on at all against Scotland. So I'm kind of circling a wagon here that if we're looking for a bit more experience because of the other enforced changes, I could see Peter Mahoney starting. I think when someone serves a suspension, they serve their time. I don't think the team need to suspend them further. What the real question is does he have the match fitness and sharpness to come straight into the cauldron against a dominant English side that's going to be very confrontational and physical?
Yeah, they've beaten us up like really badly. This is us going up against the school bully who has absolutely stolen our lunch money every time that we've met for the last couple of years. Owen said earlier on, the only way to beat them was with power. I don't know about that though. Because we've tried that, and it turns out they're stronger than us. So what can we do if it's not just raw power? What's the game plan for us beating this England team at the moment?
Yeah, well, I think a huge weapon for us at the moment is our line out, whether it's both attack and defensively. It's been motoring along pretty well since Paul O'Connell's come back in. Now, obviously, the guys have mentioned James Ryan's role in that, so he's not going to be available. But I think that's another reason why Peter Mahoney might come in, because again, he's a brilliant line-out operator, especially defensively. So are we just going to play territorially and try and pin them back and try and put pressure on their ball? Having said that, there's not much wrong with England's line-out as well. I know they've had a change from Jamie George at the start of Six Nations, and Count Dickey has come in and done well and looks to probably continue in the hooker role. But and obviously we're not going up against a weak line-out in Itoje and Ewells. At the same time, I think we are going to kick the ball a lot against England. I don't think we're going to try and run over the top of them. And at times, our box kicking was inconsistent against Scotland, which again is why I think if we're going to go down that route, because ultimately we did get change from it, why I'd like to see Conor Murray start if we're going down the box kicking route, because he's a lot more consistent. It's very difficult when you're a winger and you're not sure if it's going to hang up short or whether it's going particularly long. It completely changes your mindset, and you're trying to read it after the ball is kicked, but you're also trying to avoid the slightly lazy runners that are trying to put you off track. Whether you're going to try and make a ruck from whoever's collected the ball, whether it's contestable, whether actually you're overrunning this ball, you need to completely pull back. So I think if we are going down that kicking route, I would like to see Conor Murray starting. If we're not, then I would continue with Jamie Gibson-Park, just to give him a little bit, just to give him 3 or 4 games, a bit of continuity, and see what he can produce against an English side.
How do Ireland turn territory into more success against England? Because it seemed to work the opposite way in the Nations Cup game at the end of last year.
Yeah, and we all know that with the likes of Eddie Jones, he's quite happy to let the opposition take the ball and kick it back to them as well. I guess we're looking for a bit more from our attack in general, Owen, and I think an interesting soundbite actually from Keith Earls, when not obviously a man that speaks an awful lot to the media, but he was speaking more so about CJ and about attack. He was suggesting that, even as a back three and as a back line, they're trying to take more pressure off their 9s and 10s. But what's happening sometimes is that there's 2 or 3 different guys putting a call out there, and there's a bit of a miscommunication over they're all the right call if they're done, but which one are we going to go with? So it's about one guy maybe taking ownership outside of that 10 channel and taking the pressure off Johnny and going with it. So they're obviously looking at trying to get the ball to the wings a little bit more and not just power play up the middle. I think we're seeing a nice little bit of interchange as well, with some deft hands between the backs and forwards a little bit more. It's not probably as much as we'd like, but obviously Tadhg Furlong, Tadhg Byrne, must be the Tigers, but they're particularly good at that lovely little inch play, that pull back pass, that they're still a threat carrying the ball directly to the line, but they'll have the skills and to pull it back and put their whatever back usually is out the back of that into a little bit of space. So I think it's a little bit, we'll obviously have to get our go forward ball. I think our breakdown has been particularly accurate, which you need to be to then clear that ball away off the deck. And then it's a little bit of the mixed bag where Gibson-Park does come in, like he offers that little bit of a threat. He likes to take a step or two with the ball, get runners off him. We don't want him to get isolated and turned over, but I think that little bit of a mixed bag and playing a little bit more to the wings. But I think from the guys, what they're saying themselves is they need to be a bit clearer with their communication when they are taking the pressure off Johnny, they're making the calls about which call they're going to go with.
From what you're saying there, Louise, it does sound like the wingers aren't getting a fair crack at the whip to show their skills at the moment. Now, I know James Lowe has obviously exposed himself defensively over the last little week, but it does seem that there's a lot of work to be done here to get the best out of them offensively.
To get the best out of them offensively, is it?
Or defensively, yeah. As in giving them the best opportunity to attack.
Yeah, look, it's as a winger, it's the most difficult thing is often to get on the ball or get involved. Like, I know we're all saying Keith Earls had a pretty good game the last day, but it was all defensively.
Yeah.
If you actually look at the carries and meters made, not because, due to lack of opportunity, more so he didn't get on the ball as much. And James Lowe is certainly someone, look, we're going to use his boot defensively. It's a weapon of his, but we want him getting the ball and running. Whether he gets the opportunity or not this weekend, I'm not so sure. Particularly if we have the likes of Jacob Stockdale coming into the side or Jordan Larmour, that we want to use them, particularly those two guys, because their skills are more prolific in attack than in defence. We want them getting the ball. We want them creating one-on-ones. We did see with Lowe the last day, just, hugging the touchline very early on in the game and getting a nice, making a nice bit of ground up, but we just never seem to get the ball into their hands and give them that opportunity of a sort of 1v1 in the Scottish game.
One of the big debates that we've been having is clear signs of progress or not from the coaching ticket at the moment. My argument at the moment is that we've made the decision that we're going to pick a head coach who doesn't have international head coaching experience or head coaching experience. So there's going to be a bedding in period. We either accept that, and that was part of the decision, that we knew that was going to be the case, and we allow him to work his way through that and move on, or we're like, oh, listen, this guy has no experience. Either it was a stupid decision in the first place, or we understood how long it was going to take him to get up to speed. And I think that if you look at the difference that O'Connell has made, like, there are clear signs of progress, that the coaching ticket has been freshened up. They looked at a problem, they diagnosed that problem, and they moved on. And that's really all I want from my head coach, is that we're making progress, we're getting better, we're building on what we have. There is some strength and depth emerging in positions that we didn't have. And, I think I'm a bit more positive about this than most people are.
Yeah, Ger, I'm probably pretty similar to yourself. Like, once we are seeing some sort of progress, and I'd say, as you say, addressing some of the issues. So certainly bringing Paulie in the line has been a huge success. And then even, seeing the likes of Craig Casey getting capped, Ryan Baird coming on, we're talking about him. I know he hasn't had huge amount of game time at this level at all, but still his impact has been so positive that there is a suggestion that he could start against England the next day. What we are seeing is we're trying to get a little bit more into it. We're trying to get a bit more width on the ball from the sound bites coming out from the guys, which I know we can't pay too much attention to media at all, but I do think there's a sense of, I suppose, satisfaction from within the squad about what they're getting. And I think, again, Johnny, when after the Scottish game, he said he's really enjoying his rugby. He wants to go training every day. That is that is a man that is happy with his coaching ticket. Okay, you could say if you're being selected, you're always going to be a certain amount happy, but he's also the captain, so he's looking at the whole total squad and where he sees the squad going. That's a positive thing. If your main player is coming up 38 years of age, and who could be known to be a bit is cantankerous, yes. Too strong word?
No, it's perfect.
That he can turn around and say, I want to go training every day, I'm enjoying every training every day, that he name checks the management, that they're pretty happy with everything that's going on, the direction that they're going. It's not going to happen with a click of their fingers. What I would like to see, and sorry, another positive is bringing in the likes of finding Hugo Keenan, who I think has very much solidified that full back role. I know we've spoken about him before. So it's not like we're talking about just sticking with the same they have blooded in a few new players. What I would like to see is, we're obviously doing quite well in the breakdown. We're getting a few turnovers. I'd just like to see some sort of a switch where we really attack, as opposed to, okay, we've turned over the ball, I will try, an up and under, or we'll try go 2 or 3 phases, and and it's pretty predictable. We'll try and beat them up, or else we'll kick the ball back. I'd like to see, hang on here for a split second. If everyone switches on, we can counter here, we can go from here. Or again, it's such a kicking game in the Northern Hemisphere, those loose kicks, can we try and create a little bit more than our back three, maybe one pass run, pass kick, or just a carry straight into contact. I just think a little bit of that kind of broken unstructured play, if we could even score once or twice off that, it could really get the guys' confidence up, and it could really open up the game a little bit for us. So from an attack point of view, we're always going to have, your structure when there's a full defensive line in front of you, because we're talking about international rugby here. Defences are generally good. But it's when you get those slide opportunities, just a rip ball and then tackle, when they do not have a full defensive line. I'd like to see a little bit more of a spark of, oh lads, we're on, let's go, let's actually be really ambitious here. Let's maybe try even that 60-40 offload, particularly if we're coming off the back of a knock on from them and we're going to be going back for the scrum. But let's not just kick the ball away.
We do have a tendency when it's penalty advantage to try slightly, it would have to be an outrageous piece of skill for this to come off with a kick, and it's like, why don't we just keep building those penalties in the hope that actually we end up picking up a card? I don't know, maybe it's a strategic decision that actually we're going to go quick with the kick, and if that doesn't work, we'll come back. And because we believe in our set piece so much that we believe that kicking to the corner is going to give us that line out maul. But it just feels like the French and the English in particular are much better at scoring tries off penalty advantage than we are at the moment. I did want to talk about Joey Carbery, because anybody who loves Irish rugby must have been unbelievably excited with the try that he created last weekend, and it's very far off Broadway. And I appreciate the fact that these are two Pro 14 teams who are shorn of whatever relevant internationals they are, but at the same time we've seen them do it before for Ireland in an international match, so it was pretty exciting. And like, if you're the Ireland head coach and you've been looking at the paucity of options you have at out half when Sexton is injured or has to go off or miss a game, it's like, well, welcome back to the party, Joey, because we need you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hugely exciting as an Irish rugby fan and as a Munster rugby fan as well. And it is like, Joey always has had a brilliant rugby game or running game. So to be able to spot that opportunity and just slide through that gap was phenomenal. It was brilliant to see. And I think, whenever anyone's out with a long-term injury, as a fan, you're just delighted for them to have, a piece of individual skill like that you think they're going home smiling. Look, we're not going to see him this weekend, but I think what's going to be Joey's kind of biggest spotlight now will be the Pro 14 final the following week. Whether I'm not sure where he is in Joan Van Grand's plan. Is he going to start? Certainly, I imagine if he's not starting, he's going to be on the bench. And whether it's JJ, I know JJ's been playing a bit of 12 as well when Joey started the last day, or we've Ben Healy around there as well. But I think that's going to be his biggest platform now to progress and to catch Andy Farrell's eye. But I think it's more, again, looking further down the line, and hopefully we'll have some internationals that he can get back into that international system. But yeah, we're all a bit like, phew. But again, a bit like, you look at the French there, and Intimac is back, but he can't even get on the field because Jalabert is absolutely carving it up. So I guess we have built depth in other areas, but that kind of the 10, I suppose specifically, it's where we have a lot of players there, but we don't even know exactly who our clear number 2 is. I mean, coming out of the Six Nations wouldn't necessarily say it's going to be Billy Burns going into the next block of games.
I mean, but it's Joey Carbery. That's the thing. It's just, if he could just get fit and stay fit for 6 months, then we'll all be like, yeah, that's it. Like, because I think it's clear.
Bit of robustness.
Yeah, and look, everybody had their chance. You can't say Billy Burns didn't have his chance, or that Ross Byrne didn't have their chance. They've had their chance, and we know what they can do, and it's grand. But Joey Carbery is potentially world class, and is at this point the natural successor. Look, everybody knows that we've been banging on about Joey Carbery's brilliance in this show for a long time over the last number of years, so I'm very excited about that. And look, here's the thing: we stand on the precipice of an incredible month of rugby if Ireland can beat England this week. The excitement that there will be around that Leinster-Munster clash if Ireland beat England is absolutely massive. And if they don't, there'll just be this little sense of, oof, what are we actually fighting for here? It's just a Pro 14 title. I know it's a big thing, but it could really take the wind out of the sails for the rest of the year.
Yeah, Candor. I guess, look, we want to look beyond this weekend because England as well are coming off, Eddie Jones is still under pressure. All right, they ground out a win against France the weekend, but they're coming under huge pressure. On the face of it, they're obviously going to be the favourites going off the back of the last few performances we've had against them. Although things were more, I suppose, positive from November, but I actually think, like, somewhat, if we could start the Six Nations again, we were so close to beating Wales, having played with down a man for 60 minutes. France were a different animal, and I think there was certainly a lack of confidence there at that stage. And we have been starting to build. And Ireland, England coming out of Paddy's weekend, it's going to be huge. And the fact that it could be CJ's last game in an Irish jersey, like, there's a lot of grit in these guys. There's a lot of cojones in them, so I wouldn't be surprised if they can turn it around. But again, we're talking about us overpowering England, okay, and how we're going to get ball, but can we stop the English power game? And certainly where they got us as well in the last few games is those little dinks in behind. We were bludgeoned by George Ford and Elliot Daly and Johnny May in the last few games, so we need to make sure that we're very much covering our backfield. But again, they're off the back of such serious power and dominance in the front line, that they've such go forward ball that we've no line speed, that's when you're going to be putting in those lovely little dinks behind. I think another thing we have to be careful of is, for a period of that second half against Scotland, particularly our set piece defence, we just didn't come up off the line, and we really gave the Scottish a lot of go forward, a lot of momentum, one of which ended up in Hugh Jones' try. Against England, we can't do that, because we all remember back to August before the World Cup in Japan, when they were just scoring for fun at first phase of set piece. So we know they can do that as well. We need to make sure we come up off the line and we stick on our tackles and stick in our man.
Louise, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us on your day off as well. You're very good for getting out of bed first on St. Patrick's Day.
No problem.
Thanks a million.
Cheers, guys.